Hello, please take a seat. We need to start again. We're behind for 40 minutes at least. Okay, our next speaker is Bala. Bala is the Director of Marketing, IP, and Broadband at Ericsson, where he leads the Ericsson fourth generation IP and the service provider SDN marketing efforts. Bala has over 20 years of experience in telecom industry, including conceptualizing, launching, managing, and positioning telecom products and solutions. Now, Bala will give us a presentation. Please sit down. I'll go out, ask everybody to get back in. Anyone can find their word. We need his slides. I tried.
Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me? Am I good? Okay. Good. Thank you for joining this session. I'm going to talk today about network, service, and business transformation in the network infrastructure using service provider SDN, cloud, and NFV. If there's something that I've learned in the 20 years that I have been in this industry, it's one thing, that you always listen to what your customers want. That is the #1 rule of success. And in that spirit, I'm going to frame what I talk today into 3 distinct sections. I'm going to talk first about what's on the consumer's mind. And if I talk about this as a network equipment vendor, then what's on the mind of our customer's customer, the end user of these services. How does that change what the network needs to do? So if we need to fulfill what the customers are asking us to do, how does the network need to change? And the third part is, how do we enable that? So I plan to talk on this in very generic term on what we should be doing or what should be doing as an industry to ensure that we fulfill, that we are migrating the network infrastructure to a role that consumers of that service want it to be. So what do customers of the network really want? If you look at the network as an ecosystem, you can broadly categorize the customers of that network infrastructure into 2 segments. One is the consumers and enterprises. And the consumers are people like you and me, and the enterprises are the organizations that we work for example. And then the second distinct category is the application ecosystem. And these are the e-commerce sites, the social media sites, the news sites, the content sites that we are all addicted to now. And the application ecosystem delivers its value to the consumers and enterprise using the network as an infrastructure today. And a lot of the value obviously flows even directly today. That's the disruptive innovation that has happened in this industry. Now, what do consumers and enterprises want? If you whittle down all the requirements, and if you do a self-introspection and think of what you really want from the network, it really boils down to 2 key things. It's performance and personalization. The ability to ensure that you get the right performance at the right time based on what you need, not performance that somebody said is the right thing for you. That level of personalization and that level of performance guarantees is what the consumer wants. And if you look at what the application ecosystem is asking for, it is pretty much the same thing. What that ecosystem is really interested in is ensuring that whatever investments they have made in creating these products and the innovation they are managing in their own ecosystem, how do they convey that with the same experience that they intended it to be consumed with to the consumer? That's possible only if the network becomes a part of that ecosystem, right? And once you the hope from that ecosystem is that once you can plug in the network as a piece of that ecosystem in which there is a lot of innovation today, you can actually sustain and fuel that that community and use the network as another part of a bigger innovation platform. So this is what the customers of the network want. And I can actually, I actually have a small flash demo that brings home the point of what we are trying to achieve here, right? Think of a social event where you are watching a tennis match at an event. You're waiting for the game to begin, and you decide that you're going to watch some highlights from a football match the previous night. So you open your device, whatever device you have, and you click on an app, and you start watching the highlights. And most of you can relate to what happens here. This, and you know, this is not something that has not happened to a lot of us. We do see this happen all the time. But now, take a step back and look at a different app. Now the game starts. You are watching a tennis match. You have actually purchased an app that was provided to you either by the venue provider or by the lawn tennis association who owns the content, or by your network operator for that game. So you invoke that app. And all of a sudden, you can get multi-dimensional views of that game, multiple camera angles, you can get statistics on demand, and you have a very good experience that is tied to that venue and based on that app you purchased. So these are things that are possible. You know, you were in a situation where the network did not have enough bandwidth to serve you for an app that you wanted to watch. But if you are willing to pay for an app that has network functionalities built into it, then it is possible to provide a greater user experience. And this is what the user wants, this is what the ecosystem wants, and this is where the network can actually be part of that ecosystem and be a credible member of that value chain. So this is what we want, and this is what our customers are asking us to do. And this changes, this possibility and these demands from consumer really changes what's on the network operator's mind. And what are these things? What are these three things that are on the minds of our customers if we were to follow the same principle of, you know, listening to what our customers want? One is agility. You know, today it takes 4 to 6 months to roll out a new service on a network. But if you are talking about moving the network to a state where it can cater to these hundreds of apps that are being created every day, and you want at least a reasonable amount of them to be network enabled, then you are talking about a scale of agility in service creation that is unmatched by what we have today. So you need the network to be a very agile platform that can create services really quickly. The second thing is innovation, and innovation that is relevant to the customers. So the ability to take and package the innovations happening in that application ecosystem, match it to the demands of the consumers, and create innovative service offers. How do you do that in the network? And that's possible only if you can convert this network into a platform of innovation and tie it to the larger efforts that is happening in the content and the application ecosystem and the consumer side as well. And the third thing is efficiency. And you can tie a lot of this to the requirement of personalization. You know, think about Facebook. Every time you log into Facebook, you get a homepage that is customized for you. You get your own homepage, you get your newsfeed, you see your pictures, you see your friends. And 1 billion other users actually see their own customized homepage. Is it possible for us to get that level of personalization into the network? If you want to have a personalized performance metric or personalized access profile every time you log on to your network. So if you want to do that, then you're talking about increasing the efficiency in that network by massive scales. But anyway, these are the things that are on our customers in mind. So what we really want to talk about today is how do we enable that? And that is what we are all gathered here today to talk about as a group, as an industry. How do we enable the network to play its rightful role in that ecosystem? Here's what we think. We have now come to a realization, and when I say we, I think I speak generally for the industry, that while we can run these technologies that are emerging, NFV, cloud, SDN on its own, if you really want to harness the value of these innovations and these emerging technologies, you need to tie them together. You need to create applications that take the benefits of all these different technologies tied together in applications that can be given to end user. So you can use NFV to virtualize, but is it good enough to virtualize on a standalone server? Does it even make any sense if you cannot scale it flexibly? Then you need to tie in the cloud so that you can virtualize and scale and deploy these functions optimally. But even is that good enough? If you really want to move to this model where you can offer personalized services and personalized performance guarantees, you are now talking about the ability to move around these network functions to different parts of the network or the content delivery geography. So closer to the user, perhaps, in some case, or closer to a cluster of homes for a different application. And that kind of real-time control and real-time orchestration comes from SDN. So if you really want to make the network into an entity that can offer dynamic services, personalized services, you need to be able to tie these three technologies together and come up with applications that take the best of all of these and create solutions. And if you do that, if you end up doing that, what you are really talking about is you're looking at that infrastructure, underlying infrastructure, in terms of a couple of layers. There's the resource and control layer, which is the abstraction and the network control. That is a pool of resources that includes the wide area network, it includes the access, it includes the data center. These are a pool of resources that can be used by a layer above it, which is the service layer, which is the service management layer. And this is where you do the cross-domain orchestration, and you have catalog-driven services so that you can define services and say, what are the dependencies for that service to be enabled in that network? And on top of that, you have a business layer. This is where you actually create a catalog of services and apps that you can offer, and then define the business logic of when something should be invoked, how something is sold, a storefront exposure perhaps on an app store or a network app store where you could go and buy these apps. And then when you invoke that app, it goes through the service enablement layer. It gets told that if you need to be running this app in this location, these are the resources that are needed. And then the control and the virtualization layer actually allocate those resources on demand, move those resources on demand. That's how the network needs to evolve. It needs to think of the wide area network and the data center as a common pool of resources on which you host a layer where you can have virtualized network functions and move them around on demand. So if you end up doing that, in order to pull something off, what you are really doing is you are creating a very personalized slice of the network for that app for that time. For example, if you looked at the app that we saw before, what that app is offering is actually, what that app is getting is a very personalized slice of the entire resources of the network for the duration that app is running. So this is what we call network slices. And there are multiple examples of what we can do with here. Virtual enterprise gateways where an enterprise can own and manage a piece of the network as their own. That's an example of a network slice. If you're talking about driverless car, the latency requirements, the quality requirements, or the throughput requirements for that, such a device would be very stringent, and it would need that the network is able to carve out a special slice for them for that entire duration. That all is great, but a reality check, it is going to take some time before we do that. So, let's see what some of the early adopters of virtualization had a few questions. And that is, why is it taking so long if we know that this is what we want to do, right? It's taking long because we have to sort out a lot of complex relationship before we actually end up doing that. If you look at NFV in itself, it has very immediate values. It talks about, we can get better time to market, we can get the elasticity, we can improve the operational efficiency. But it has its own challenges even on its own. You need to make a call on what functions it makes sense to virtualize first, what is the timeline in which you would virtualize your network. So it has its own challenge. Now add to that the cloud. Then by tying NFV and cloud, you are really putting a whole set of new requirements on that cloud infrastructure to be able to host network function virtualization, to host virtual network functions. All of a sudden, the cloud infrastructure that now you have been using in a data center has to think about bounded latency. It has to think about high availability and service continuity. It has to think about managing managing and monitoring not just virtual NIC and virtual CPU performance. Maybe there are application level indicators that these network functions have that now have to be integrated into the control mechanisms. So essentially we are in a timeline where we are hashing out this relationship between these technologies. And the same thing, what is the relationship between SDN, NFV, and cloud? If you look at the very basic, the very first application of SDN, it was as a resource for a cloud network to set up its network. I mean, the SDN was used as a resource for setting up the network infrastructure to deliver cloud services. So the northbound interface really was a one-way communication. It was the cloud manager telling the SDN controller, hey, I need you to set up this network for my cloud services. Now you throw in NFV into the mix, and all of a sudden the applications that you are virtualizing in the cloud are not general applications, not IT applications. They are now network services that you are virtualizing. And in that sense, it falls under the SDN domain for managing the network. So all of a sudden now the SDN controller needs to talk to the cloud and use the cloud as a resource for hosting its own services. So that relationship now becomes a two-way relationship, because not only is the cloud using the SDN as a resource to set up its infrastructure, the SDN is using the cloud as a resource to set up some of its network services and network applications. So there is a lot of work going on in this field. And this, if you look at, if you take a step back and look at what is the industry survey of service providers telling us, what is driving this migration and what are the barriers to this migration. If you look at the top three items on the left, what are the drivers? And it maps very well to what I said, what was on the operator's mind. It's agility, creating new services quickly. It's optimizing in real time. That's efficiency, and it's the ability to make the network so simple that you can foster innovation on top of that. So those are things that are driving this transformation. And what we need to do as a group, as an industry, is make sure that we do all we can to boost those drivers, so that that transition is self-fuel and it keeps the momentum up. And there's a lot of work actually happening in that. If you look at some of the use cases and deployments that we have had now, they all tie into this category, like service chaining, for example. It's about optimizing the network in real time. The evolution of the OSS BSS system into a catalog-driven service enablement. That's increasing the service agility even more. So we are doing a lot of things to boost what is already going good for us, and we need to mitigate. The top three factors that are barriers to this transformation. And if you look at the three, there's knowledgeable engineers. The first one. How do we make sure that there are people in the industry who can take operators and guide them through this transition? There are unclear cost benefits. There's still a lot of worry on, is this feasible? And we are actually doing a lot of work in that aspect. And when I say we, again, I talk about us as a group, us as an industry, operators are now able to deploy some of these applications that we have been talking about, and they are trying it out, and they are actually documenting benefits that accrue from deploying these technologies. So it is on the right progression. And the same thing with the concept that the technology is not mature. All the use cases that we do, as a group now we have a repository of so many use cases that we have deployed and we have tried and documented. Those are all contributing to getting this perception out of their mind that the technology is not mature. And there are sessions throughout the conference where we will talk about use cases that are not just on paper, that are being deployed in customer networks and that are being documented and tried out in labs and POCs. And they range from a whole set of new capabilities, new services, content filtering, header enrichment on demand, VAS offload, onload on demand, and new operational tools for dynamic performance management, automated orchestration for the network, a whole portfolio of use cases, and similarly a whole portfolio of business cases, especially to address a point that the gentleman before had asked. If we keep doing things to reduce the cost in the network, then we are not really enabling anything for the network operators. So there is a lot of work that is being done on a different aspect of SDN, NFV, and cloud. That is, how do we increase revenues, not just reduce the cost? And that is I think that is what will boost the adoption at a much faster rate. In the end, you can go down on OpEx and CapEx only to zero, right? There's a limit to how far you can go down. There's no upper limit to the amount of revenues you can increase if you are innovative enough and you have the infrastructure to do it. So, we have done some work on what is the impact of just reducing the service, the time to market for new services by a couple of months. How does that impact revenues? And if you do that in a sustained way, if you have the capability to launch new services faster than your competitor consecutively for a year, how does that impact your revenues? So a lot of work is being done on clarifying that the cost benefit of adopting these technologies. And then last but not least, how do we execute this transformation? We need to come up with a structured way of documenting how do we guide our customers through this process. So there's, the first few months are going to be a learning exercise, but soon we will get to an industrialized format of this. So you take the components on the left side, the infrastructure, the SDN, the enablement layer, the process, the organization, and then you go through a planning phase where you discover what makes sense to do, you document, the requirements, and then you create a roadmap of, or first a blueprint of what you want to achieve in a couple of years, and then and the roadmap of how do you do that, and then the actual transformation, and then post-transformation lifecycle management. So this will become an industrialized process once we start the ball rolling. Now, this is a slide that I used at the Broadband World Forum last year, and I know this is a technology conference, so it's almost sacrilegious to put up this slide and say that, the hard questions, what are the hard questions? But that is a fact. If you look at how any emerging technology goes to commercialization, the difficulty of questions that are being asked moves from different domains. So initially you ask the hard questions on technology, then you ask the hard questions on business, and then you ask the hard questions on the operations part. And I think, this is where I would map SDN and NFV on that timeline. And I think the fact that we are now asking the hard questions on operations in relation to SDN and NFV tells us that we are on the right path to commercializing this technology. We are not just asking the questions on technology. Is this feasible? Yes, it is feasible. We can do anything we want to. But is it viable, and can I scale and manage it? That's what we are asking now. And so that shows real progression in the technology. And in the end, SDN is going to be a means to a higher end. SDN is going to be an enabler for a lot of other applications that are driven by the cloud ecosystem by the move to NFV, and SDN will become an inevitable infrastructure for that real-time control in that new scenario. So in conclusion, what I have to say is that it takes three to tango. You have to get NFV, you have to get cloud, and you have to get SDN together to really derive value out of that. And then you can embark on this multifaceted transformation of that infrastructure that includes not only the network, but also the service and the service offers that go with it and the business models that go with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bala. And thank you for getting us back on time. Questions for Bala? Over there. Mike? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hakan.